record this, and then I'm going to share the screen. So, looking at your Canvas site today, where are we? We are moving along. Module 4 already. We're getting shit done. Today, we're going to talk about Alex Vital, the end of policing. There are your reading responses and a couple other articles I gave you. I thought the reading responses were very good last week. Very happy with how these are proceeding. If you have any issues or questions, please be in touch. Next week, you do not have a reading assignment. Next week, you have a paper due, your first paper. So I'm going to go over that with you all right now. Okay. So let's see here. Your first paper, 4 to 5 pages in length, standard formatting. Don't try any funny business, please. These papers are due by email, September 30th. Just as a note, I'm going to give you the whole day you can get them in by the end of the day. Okay, you don't have to have them in by class time. I'll deduct a third of a grade, letter grade, for each day that they are late. So please get them in on time. And as for the topics, I have come up with a couple. And if you have a different one you'd rather look at, then I'm completely open to it. I just need to hear from you, please. Okay. Feel free to ask me questions at any point during this writing process. You may email me, of course, or you may set up an appointment on Zoom. Pretty flexible since I am homebound. Just say when, and I can pop on the Zoom and we can chat. Otherwise, you can send me an outline at any point to look at, and I can give you feedback. If you want to give me a rough draft, that's going to have to be very soon. Otherwise, I urge you to take your rough drafts to the writing studio. You can also talk to the writing studio at any point about the writing process. And they are up and running online, and I have included their website right here. What I'm looking for in these papers. These are your first papers. I'm calling interpretive papers, meaning that you are invited, more like forced, because I'm requiring this, to offer an interpretation on the readings. These are not out of left field. These are questions that we've already vetted and discussed to some extent, not completely. And you're going to offer an interpretation of a text that we've read, and you are going to back it up. So first thing I'm looking for these papers, persuasive argumentation. You make a claim, that is a claim about the interpretation of the text, and then you give supporting evidence in terms of quotes or references to the text. It is important that you demonstrate that you are familiar with the text and that you paid attention to it, but please do beware of quoting too much. There is a happy medium. Clarity, I've got to be able to understand what you're saying. Informal proofreaders can be invaluable here. This is, if you grab like a family member or a roommate or friend and say, would you just tell me that I'm making sense, that you understand what I'm saying. Correct grammar and spelling, this is point 3. They do play into your clarity. If your grammar is problematic and there's spelling problems, then we will not understand. I will not understand what you're trying to say. So that's where the writing studio can really be essential if you have some recurring or major grammar and spelling problems. Insightful comments and critiques is what separates the good papers from the adequate ones. Raise insights and points beyond what we discussed in our class discussions, okay? Footnoting. I want you to be using what is in the business is called Chicago-style footnoting. If you ever need any help on the format of Chicago-style footnoting, just go to Google and type in Chicago-style footnotes, and you'll find a plethora of resources on how to do this for a variety of sources. Chicago-style refers to the style and the format of footnoting. And as an added point, many of you may be used to doing what are called in-text citations when you quote. Please note, in this class, that's not what you're doing. I'm asking you to footnote, which means that you type a quote, and then you will literally, then you'll go to insert the top of the page. I'm talking about MS Word. I think it's quite similar, and you guys probably use Google Docs. You go to the top of the page under insert, scroll down to footnote, and then then the word processor automatically, that is Google Docs or MS Words, automatically puts the cursor at the bottom of the page. That is the footer of the page. The footer is that bottom margin. And there you will then type in the reference material for the footnote. I've given you here an example of what Chicago style formatting looks like if you were to quote from Wendy Brown's book, Undoing the Demos. You get your author, you get your title, you have your city, publisher, year, page. Please note you only give all that information with the first footnote. All subsequent footnotes from the same text, you simply give the author's name or abbreviation of the name, just last name, and then the page number. Okay. If you are using MS Word or Google Docs, you can always go up to the help function, type in footnote, and that will indicate to you how to do it. Okay. Down below here, you have your topics. I'm not going to go over these. I'm going to let you look at them on your own. Okay. And like I said, if there are topics that you are interested in on your own, then that is going to be fine also, but I want to talk, I want to hear about them. These first papers, in this class, I see our writing your writing assignments building on one another. You will culminate in an independent research project. But we start with, I consider this a modest effort. I want you to, pay close attention to the text, demonstrate that you're paying attention, that you're understanding, that you are open to the author and understanding what the author is saying. I have a little bit of a different assignment for our next go around, the next set of papers, but that's what I'm thinking for the first one. And by the way, these topics that I've drawn up are only about the text we have read by next week, which means I have prompts on Wendy Brown's book and on The End of Policing for today. I fully accept and understand that to answer these questions, you only need reference those texts. If you wish to bring in other sources, that is perfectly fine too. Okay. All right, I'm going to pause there for a second and see if anybody has any questions. Does anybody have any questions at this point about the papers?
If we're doing the footnotes, do we also need a works cited page?
Excellent question. The answer is no. Thank you, Laurel. I should have indicated that. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, well, you can get in touch with me at any point, okay? And I posted these last week. They've been on there, so, maybe hopefully some of you have already started working on these or thinking on them. How is everything going this week? How's everybody doing? Any issues I should hear about? Everything A-okay? Anybody have any general updates on how their online education is going at Micah? What's working, what's not?
I was telling my friend that it's really not that bad, but maybe I shouldn't be describing my education as not that bad.
Good point. Anybody else? Any surprise benefits?
I've been able to appreciate kind of learning how to work from home, really forcing yourself to find a way to have a studio when you don't have all of the kind of everything handed to you, but still with the backbone and support of school structure to an extent. So there can be silver linings.
Anybody else? Surprise benefits.
Hanging out with the cats.
Cats. All right. Anybody find it more or less stressful?
I think we're, at least in my case, I'm trading some stresses for benefits and some benefits for stresses. So
Stresses for benefits, benefits for stresses. I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
I mean, there's some good aspects, and then there are some not so good aspects. The lack of a studio and sort of having that responsibility now on my back, not only to secure tools and secure a place to do everything, but also sort of like having sort of centralized things. It's very easy to deal with, obviously getting to class and not getting, and I think like the amount of like what work I'm supposed to do is like a lot more clear now that everything has to be online. Like I'm not missing readings or things.
Good. Anybody else?
I feel like everything takes me like twice as long to make. Like, I don't know, I'm just more like lazy and slow because I'm always at home.
I want to segue. I want to use this as a segue into one last topic from last week. And this is really only the briefest of, we're going to touch on this only in the briefest of way, because there's no way we could give this, do this justice right now. And I'm also kind of going to broach this topic to plant this as a seed in your brains. And maybe if this is something you would like to think about further, okay? Last week we had a discussion about the economics of higher education. And I wonder if any of you guys, and again, I realize I haven't prepped you for this question. I'm going to drop this on you right now, and I don't know what I'm going to get. I wonder if any of you guys have any thoughts about what from this experience higher ed must learn. And I'm also going to put the question this way. Are there aspects of this online experience that you think should be carried over to when we're back in the classroom? While you all mull that over, I'm going to type it into the chat.
I think it would be hard to imagine how it's gonna be like in the future when we all go back to classroom and talking about like how this whole online classes situation has been. It feels like really unreal. It still feels like really unreal to me. I cannot remember how was it when we were like in a classroom, like a normal.
You already forgot?
It feels like a really long time, and like I just can't imagine how it's gonna be when we all go back to classroom. And what else?
I agree with you. I had that same thought, Gloria.
Also, like when I first talked, first thought about college, I don't know what I was expecting when I first come to like a higher education, because you don't know what you're gonna get from this whole learning process. It's all unknown, and like yeah, I still don't know like what I'm expecting from this whole higher education, and yeah, just learning things that I've never known before, and like and till this like pandemic, it was like make it like more like unknown to me, and especially like I'm alone right now, and I don't know where I should go in the future, and like what can this experience become, like would it help or would it not? So like I really Yeah, it's just like a really weird time right now.
Thank you for being so honest, Gloria. It sounds like you're really searching, and I appreciate that.
I feel like,
Oh,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
oh,
raise
no, you could go. You could go.
your eyes. Don't forget to raise your hands if you can.
I feel like higher education should be scared a lot right now, because I think it's really demonstrating, people's ability to learn, obviously through online platforms, which has already been existing for like years with Khan Academy and other things. But to get, like get an accredited degree, a degree from, that from a higher education institution, and doing it online in a way that like all these overhead costs that we'd have to pay for, being it like dorms, being it technology fee, being it living fees, part of your tuition is going to paying all the recruitment officers, and part of the tuition is going to paying all the counselors, and like all that is gone. And higher education like has to reckon with the fact like either you need to make this more accessible and absolutely drop prices, or why do you exist? Like, why should it exist in the first place if it's, if most of the money paying to the tuition isn't even going to teaching at all?
Thank you. Jennifer, were you going to chime in?
I was, but I guess like everyone really got into it, but like I guess I am appreciative of the structure of the current classes, or at least like in terms of studio. Most of them are where we meet for the first and the last hour, and we have our independent time. I have a feeling like when we get back, I don't know about everyone else, but for me, I think my attention span and my tolerance for like dumb shit is probably going to be a lot lower. I think like being online makes it easier to run out of things to say. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Thank you. I see Gia says Zoom office hours, and I think she's recommending this for the post-COVID world. I could definitely see myself. I was a technophobe before COVID, and now I definitely have learned some tools that I could use that would really make it easy, to hold office hours with students. I could stay home in my pajamas. That would be rocking. But here's the real question. Oh, Cindy, you go for it.
Oh, I was gonna like say something that was like similar to what Gabriel said, which was basically like honestly during this pandemic, especially when it was like when it was just like quarantine and everybody just like was not allowed to go outside, a lot of like resources online like started popping up for like discounts on lessons and classes and stuff like that. And that really, and he's right that higher education should be really scared, because all of these like educational resources online, which are way cheaper, can teach you the same amount like what a degree is supposed to like, like I guess like what a degree sort of like higher education should teach you, I guess. And like it honestly like I personally think that the whole online format like works for me personally, because I'm kind of someone who likes to like I'm very introverted as a person, and like sometimes like I just like being in the peace of my room and just like concentrating on my assignments that way. And like I find it actually really nice, because I find it really nice in my opinion, but that's just my personal thing. So I feel like colleges should kind of consider like, a mix between like online learning and like learning like face to face, because I know some people were definitely like, I want to be in the studio, I want to be like face to face. That totally like makes sense and stuff, and like I totally understand it. But there was like other people, especially like I've also like noticed this with some classes that I've actually helped taught on Zoom. Some people actually love the online platform because they feel like it's not too like, I guess like socially anxiety inducing. So that's another thing I feel like educations and educators should kind of take in mind of, is like there are people that blossom in these kinds of environment for like just as much. And like yeah, I think that's all I was gonna say.
Very much, Cindy. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I'm glad you spoke to what Gabriel says. I mean, Gabriel really raises the main issue. Back in the spring, when we were all put online, there were a couple of jarring editorials that were posted on major publications saying something to the effect of like what he just said, like higher ed better be scared. You know, this is now pulling back the curtain on the frivolous expenses and showing what can be done in a streamlined fashion. And in the best, you know, in the best possible universe, as with any crisis, we will realize what is essential, and then make, you know, the kind of reforms that really matter. But to that point, I'm going to pose my question a different way. I'm putting it up here right now, and my question is really this: what do you think? Has this experience enlightened you all about what is the value of the classroom or campus experience, which is what higher ed is supposed to offer, right? Can we do this online? I guess we can. Is it the same? Not exactly. What's missing, if anything? Or is it just...
Well, sorry, I guess as artists, I think a clear first answer is kind of studio space and just facilities, materials, things like that, like physical necessities.
Okay, the physical necessities of the studio. Do you need to be around other people?
I mean, I don't think anything's going to replace standing around somebody's piece and everybody critiquing it, right? There's a lot of things that are going on with that, which is having, you know, you're physically in that space, and other people are physically in your presence, and being asked to defend something that you're putting up. I think that is sort of core essential part of art, is that, you know, when, you know, you are putting a piece of yourself up, right? And that might be hard. It might be easier for people to critique like over Zoom, right? If they have social anxiety or stuff. But once again, like part of being here is sort of and going to art school is actually, you know, conquering that to some extent, right? Because, you know, in the real world, things are a bit different. I think for almost everybody in this, I think everybody in this class is not a freshman. So like, we know what art school was before this, and we know, like, and there's a lot of people here are juniors, so there's an expectation, you know, that like next year things might go back to normal. But I wonder, like, I want to ask sort of, like, I wonder what somebody who doesn't know what that critique experience is like, what their value after, you know, being a freshman, who was ever a freshman online here, and like, what is their sophomore year gonna look like? How are they gonna feel about that? You know, is it going to be overwhelming or shocking? Yeah.
Anybody have any thoughts on that? It's a good point. Good question. I do teach freshmen right now. And so I have a first year class. And that issue kind of came up. I think on the first day I said to the students, I said, what are you all regretting that you're not getting right now? And the funny answer is a couple of them said they really wanted to move out of their fucking house and into a dorm. And, you know, they wanted their independence. And I thought that was funny. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, Gabriel, I guess they don't know what they're missing, right? They don't know it yet. Yeah, and you know, as always, feel free to type your answers in the chat if you want. But any other thoughts? What do you think? What is missing? Because, you know, the radical reform that could come out of this is that we do this all online from here on out. There's no such thing as a campus. There's no such thing as a Meyerhoff cafeteria and a campus store. And well, the campus store will be online, but you know, no more Micah football team. Can you imagine? You know, and no buildings. And
I feel like one thing for me, like to be noticed, is like one was in Micah. my English was much better. But these days, when I talk with my professor about my thesis and everything, I feel like I couldn't speak English that well. And then like I was thinking like for international students, like environment has always been a really important part for like learning language. But without that environment, sometimes it just changed. And then you still speak like, for example, like I except for taking class and then having discussion, mostly I speak with my parents with Chinese. And then now when I speak English, I always like forgot what I'm going to say or like what like I'm having a hard time to find appropriate like vocab for like a more formal like discussion, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you, Vicky. I've also heard from some international students say that they appreciate when I record the classes. They can go back and look them over if, as need be. So that's an interesting benefit here.
I also have the same experience. I'm like not only I'm in a situation that is not just like English, like but also my native language. Like in this 6 months, the most thing I have been doing with like communication was like typing. I haven't talking. I had a really small chance to talk to someone face to face, and like I just also like I think online courses, the missing part for me is like communication with the peers a lot. Like those parts just like it's not like as much as it was in like when we were like physically in a space in like a classroom. um I was told like for the college that we use like 4 years to get to know our like peers, friends, and like to like make sure we will have like friends in our field in the future when we do our jobs. And like now it's like we don't have like a lot of chance to get to know each other in a class like in like online spaces.
Thank you, Gloria. And, so here's the point, everybody. If education is, and I'm going to talk about a philosopher by the name of John Dewey, who is an American philosopher. He actually taught at Hopkins for a little while. And I taught him in this class last year, and I took him off the syllabus this year because I had a lot of things I wanted to cover with you all. And I also didn't anticipate this crisis that was coming, where I think he's quite pertinent. John Dewey argues that education at the school, in particular, the school and the school space is essential to democracy. And the reason he argues this is he says that education is not about skill transfer. Education is not about skill transfer, right? That's his contention. Whether he's thinking principally about art education, I don't know. Whether it encompasses art education, I'm not sure. But, when it comes to history, I can learn the facts. I can read the book, for example. And these skills can be transferred in a variety of settings. But the principal role of the classroom, according to Dewey, is social. There's a kind of socialization that happens there. And the socialization, the key lesson being that you learn to be with other people, and you learn to be with very different peoples, and you learn to discuss and debate and negotiate and confront, right? As Gabriel says, the real world is not so accommodating all the time, and you will be challenged. And ideally, school and college would be some kind of intermediary space where you are introduced to some of the challenges and confrontations you're going to meet in the real world. That said, we do talk about MICA as being a kind of a bubble, and it is. But I know that and that's ideologically, but I know that you guys do get real confrontation in your crits. I know that. But Dewey, he wrote this before the emergence of digital communication. And in my own writing and thinking, I'm grappling with this independently. Like, what what is, yeah, Gabriel, I think you're right. I often think that Dewey was, his critique is very much directed at something like homeschooling, right? You can transfer skills, but it's very important for your child to be around other kids to learn how to get along or negotiate differences. That was part of the point. But about digital communication, I don't know. I mean, like how, this is something again for you all to think about. Maybe this is another angle for a research project. What is missing? Is there anything still missing in digital communication that would fail Dewey, right? I would put it this way. What is lost? Is there anything lost in digital communication that would that makes the process of socialization less complete? You know what I mean? I'll tell you right now, and I wrote about this last spring, an example I have is I don't even get to see your faces, right? On Zoom. I hear your voices, but I don't see your faces, and I don't really know what's going on. Even if for those of you I see your faces, I don't get the full, I don't get the full picture. One of my favorite philosophers, his name is Montaigne, he says that, and he's French, of course, he says that people communicate much more than with their mouths. Why is that French? Because French people, they use their hands and they use their, and Montaigne's point is if you really want to understand what a person is trying to say, look at the way they stand. Look at the way communication is about so much more than just the words. It is their face. It is their posture. It is how animated they are. So in the classroom, I get the benefit of seeing you speak and seeing you speak out. And I can tell, oh my God, this person is angry, or, so I don't know. Those are just some thoughts I want you to think about in terms of because, when we're talking about, the value of the classroom, what might be lost after this experience, we're talking about stuff that is rather intangible, right? I mean, the stuff that's measurable, that can be conveyed online. But the intangible stuff, like how you socialize, how you read people, how you understand people, how comfortable you are with people, how you negotiate, how you deal with confrontations. Those are the intangible skills that I suspect are very important. Anybody have any thoughts?
I mean, I feel like, it's been what, four weeks, I guess, but it feels like usually when I'm in a studio with a professor, you get to know them a lot better, and you get to know, I feel like you get so much from things that are not just taught in class. It's a conversation you have, or someone walking by and commenting on what you're working on or something. And I feel like you get so much from that is just missing, because it feels like you're just talking into this space, and it's not really you're talking to other people.
Thank you. One of the things that's really coming out of this whole experience more broadly is, and this was the lead article in The Economist last week, Economist magazine, is how the whole nature of work is being redefined. Something like half of Americans are working from home right now. And a lot of, employers are really reevaluating what this means. So apparently the company Pinterest, you guys all know Pinterest, right? Pinterest just reneged on a multi-million-dollar lease on an office space in downtown San Francisco. This was going to be their gleaming headquarters. Done. They're going to redirect people home. It's cheaper. And the question from The Economist is very interesting. If you all are interested, I can share it with you. I teach a class in the spring called Capitalism and Its Critics, which is basically about economic theory. And I'm going to have a couple readings about the future of work. And because it's become more, pressing right now. But The Economist article asks, are we more efficient now? I'll give you an example. I don't have to commute anymore, which was never a pain in the butt beforehand, but that saves me an hour a day. But you know what else I don't have is, well, I don't get to see Wei Chen in the hall and be like, hey, how's it going? What'd you do your weekend? You know, did you find that nice new restaurant? Like, I waste zero time now. I get out of bed, make a cup of coffee, and I'm right at my desk. So I'm more efficient, but I'm also like, well, all the little things, like when I walk into Bunting and say hi to Dana behind the desk, say hi to so-and-so, chat with the librarian, that's all gone. And I just want to point out, Laurel thinks that I am more aware of life outside school for taking care of family members, having a job, mental health, etc. I was happy to get out of the house every day. God bless you, Laurel. You're so nice to think that I'm like that. No, I'm happy to get out of the house. Got to get away from the kids to be productive. Instead, they're around me. My kids are home at school right now. They're asking me for help in their French homework like every fucking second. So, you know, distance in my case is that makes for mental health. Anyway, Cindy, what are you going to say?
I was like gonna say that I don't know, like online education in general just kind of like emphasizes, it does make things more efficient, and I think it emphasizes more on like, I guess, like focus. Like all you gotta do is just like get online and then like focus on like whatever like is being taught to you, and like you don't really have much social interaction, I guess. Which I guess like that's the deficit of it, but I think like social interaction can be kind of like, I don't know, like a lot of my classes, for example, I personally like don't like, I didn't know any of them like when I first came in and stuff like that. But I think like there were some moments where like when there was like collaborative uh like critiques and stuff like that, small group critiques, I started to get to know some people and I started like making friends digitally this way. So I just think it's like with online, I think with how we approach like social interaction, especially in this kind of like school environment, how we're gonna make it like work, it's very different. I personally really like the whole thing of just like, you know, getting out of bed and going on my computer, because then I save so much in like a 10-minute walk to the Bunting building. I save so much time. I don't have to like I honestly, I also don't have to stress about like dressing up or anything. I could just be in my hoodie and be comfortable, and I just feel like it's a nicer environment. But yeah. Also, I think like actually with my personal experience with online education, with the teachers that I have, I think the whole thing with like, there's more emphasis on like private like critiques and like email critiques and like Zoom sessions to talk more about your projects and stuff like that, because the teachers also have time to kind of come in and talk. And sometimes I felt like in a physical environment, like back in Micah, sometimes it was a little bit hard to kind of schedule around with the teachers to meet up to like get like an extra critique on my thing, or just like to talk about anything with my teacher with like office hours and stuff. So I feel like with this online thing, since like teachers have more time, it's more immediate, I feel like I'm actually getting a lot out of my education and I'm utilizing it more so.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, you made me think of this point that, you know, the one thing that one of the things that has changed for me since being online is I get more sleep, because now I can sleep right till the buzzer, walk down, get the coffee, get in front of the computer. And my kids, I had to rush my kids to get them out of the house. I don't have to do that anymore. I have to make them a lunch. I was going, you know, I don't know that you guys are sleeping because you are Micah students and you probably don't sleep anyway, but there was an article in the New York Times. You know, New York is a famously workaholic place where people don't sleep at all. And it was an article from somewhere in like April, like suddenly it was in the New York Times, like New Yorkers are sleeping, you know, for the first time ever. There was also an article about how dogs are loving COVID because their owners are home all the time to take them on walks. Board owners taking them on walks, but the sleeping is big, you know, and one of the things that I've often been interested about, and I've also written about, is, you know, that America in particular is a distinctly workaholic culture, you know, and it's interesting to see the overlap of this discussion with our workaholic craze. And, you know, Micah you guys are all famous workaholics too. And, you know, that's why this discussion of efficiency comes up, you know. Maybe some people, they saw this as an opportunity to take a break. Some did. But just as many I've heard say, like, this is an opportunity to get ahead. And with the added time, they're doing more. Thank you for the comments. Anybody have anything else they wanted to chime in on this discussion? I just thought, you know, this is a golden opportunity to talk about, since we're undergoing this crisis right now, and there's a heated debate in academia about post-COVID reforms. You know, this is such a golden opportunity to talk about the challenge that Wendy Brown puts before us. You know, what from this lesson can be learned to repel the neoliberal agenda on academia that she sees, you know? Will colleges reorganize their priorities? How about families and students, you know, or families sending their students off to college, you know, will they be reorganizing their priorities, and how should colleges respond? We discussed last week about a lot of the, you know, the kind of frills that the colleges have put together over the years, that they add up, right? Maybe now a lazy river doesn't seem so fucking important, right? We can focus on other things, and that would be great. Okay. So consider that all food for thought, you know, and I encourage you to keep thinking about this, and, you know, this can be rolled into a deeper research project at a later point. But I'm going to segue right now and talk about this little book here, The End of Policing. Where's my camera? There it is, End of Policing by Alex Vital. By the way, you know, I think we'll spend about an hour talking about this. Next week, you don't have any reading assignment. Your papers are due, I've said, by the end of the day. So the plan for next week's class is we'll pick up whatever, you know, I imagine there's some things in here we won't get to today. And I wanted to have, you know, further discussion of them next week. And then next week also, I can make myself available after class if anybody wants to talk about their papers individually. And I can do the same today as well, if anybody's interested, okay? So, well, let me put a question to you all first and see what you all thought of this reading assignment. How'd you all find this little book? Anybody have any reactions? Nobody has any reactions?
General, like, anger.
Anger.
Yeah.
At the popo? Anger at the popo?
At the popo, at the government, at Big Pharma, you know.
Okay. Anybody else? Was this an interesting read? How about that?
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. I think honestly, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I agree with Gabriel. I think the style was very enjoyable. Also, just very insightful content-wise. Like, I knew a little bit about the how would I put this, the bullshittery of the war on drugs, but like I've never heard or read someone articulate it as well. I kind of want to get like a copy of the book and like read the whole thing.
Well, I gave you the whole book, right? Inadvertently. You have the whole book there, right?
I do. I like print though.
Ooh, Mason, you're just like me. I hate the digital shit. Yeah, I inadvertently got the whole book for you. I just, you know, I'm really bad at this. So you have the whole book if you want to read it. I think, you know, so I've never really taught police before. I've never really taught policing. Of course, like this summer, really, this issue's been building. It's not a new issue, but it really just like it really exploded this summer in America. I don't know. I'd be very curious to hear what our international students think about this. Maybe for some of you, this will be a learning experience where you understand about some of our, the really serious underlying social problems, but that have been intertwined with the police issue. But, for the international students, notice that I included an article for you all talking about how America exports its policing model, right? This is related to the defense industry, just as the defense industry, right? The defense industry is the biggest manufacturing sector of the American economy. We make more arms than cars. This is the biggest sector, and then we import this around the world. So it's not a stretch of the imagination to understand they were also, to the extent that the defense industry has then infiltrated the police, we export that as well in the forms of weapons, in the form of police training. So this police problem is not an exclusively American one. By the way, those of you who paid attention over the summer, a lot of the Black Lives Matters protests, they popped up in Europe. And under similar complaints about how the police were treating communities of color and immigrants and the like. So, any case, but it occurred to me, that it's important to talk about police because I do think that police is a very important political problem. Because the police are an extension of government, or their representation of government, or they can be perceived that way, rightly or wrongly. And they play a role in either supporting or undermining the legitimacy of a regime. And that's why, and he raises that issue towards the end of chapter 1, and I really wanted that out there. But why don't we wade into this and tick off a couple boxes here. Let's start with a big issue, which is kind of low-hanging fruit, broken windows policing. Who can explain to me what broken windows policing is about? Oh, Cameron, focus on low levels crimes. Okay.
I think it's more about like if you clean up the signs of crime or of quote unquote disorder, then the public will react. So you clean graffiti, stop loitering and panhandling, like no prostitutes on the corner, then crime should go down, which is really interesting way, to say the least, of looking at it.
Good. Thank you. Anybody else? Gabriel, other Gabriel.
I found it very interesting in the reading that what the justification was for broken windows policing. So essentially broken windows policing is where police would actively look for windows that are broken because everyone knows that criminals always have their windows broken or something to that effect. But also there was a segment that was commenting on having your windows fixed and just normal deters the basest like desires for people to vandalize your car and to like destroy it or like to steal it and all of these things. And that was like the conservative view of that, but then it is not in touch with reality.
Right.
Quote unquote, because there's already so much graffiti on the subway cars, then we're going to get more graffiti. And if the subway cars were just presented as clean subway cars, surely they would not get graffitied on. Or, yeah. or literally the broken windows. I think it's like another example is like, right, this apartment complex has a couple broken windows on the first floor. It's inevitable that at some point all the windows will be broken. Like that it's like a virus that you know.
Good. Let me call your attention to a key passage here where he explains the point about it. This is on page 7 at the top. He says, the broken windows theory magically reverses the well-understood causal relationship between crime and poverty, arguing that poverty and social disorganizations are the result, not the cause of crime, and that the disorderly behavior of the growing underclass threatens to destroy the very fabric of cities. In other words, by cleaning up, the signs of social disorganization, you will eventually root out the problem, right? There is a degree of intolerance, right? That's what the broken windows policy suggests, that now there is a degree of intolerance. And the police will not put up with any level of infraction from graffiti or broken windows to littering. The reverse thinking was that a general negligence, a general sense of negligence for these things encourages a culture of lawlessness. Okay. What is typically cited as the big glorious example where this worked? Anybody know?
Could you rephrase it?
Sure. What's the great example of where this supposedly worked?
Do you mean stop and frisk?
Among other things, where was that?
New York?
New York City.
Yeah.
New York City. So, you all are young. You're all younger than me. I don't suppose anybody here remembers New York City in the 1980s. Anyone? Anyone? Okay. Have you all been in New York City recently? I hope you've been there in the last couple of years. Times Square, right? I'm not old, but I'm going to show my age right now. New York City was so different in the late 80s, early 90s. I'm going to share my screen right now and show you. This is what the subway looked like. I remember as a kid, I have an aunt who lived in Queens, and we would go visit her in the 1970s and 80s. And I still remember the subway rumbling by, and every single inch of the subway was covered in graffiti. And when you went into the city, you went into Times Square, which now is, Disneyfied. It was full of prostitutes and sex shops, and it was way sketchy. And the city was incredibly, you had a constant feel that it was very unsafe. I remember, the Village is now one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the world. And I remember in the 1980s visiting my cousin there and being told about muggings on every corner. And actually, when I visited my cousin, I came into Port Authority, which is their bus station. And as we were going up the escalator, she instructed me to put my wallet and my cash in my socks, because as we went up the escalator, everybody was slipping their fingers into my pockets. It is remarkable the way this city is different now. And the line is, the official line, I'm just telling you the official line. The official line is that broken windows, that was the policy that was endorsed by the police, the New York City police. And by the way, the mayor at that time was Rudy Giuliani. He is he's given credit, right or wrong, for that turnaround. And the thinking is that this was sparked by broken windows, right? Suddenly, I don't know if you guys, has anybody here heard about a show on HBO called The Deuce? It's with James Franco, and it's directed by David Simon, who did The Wire. He's a Baltimore guy. And The Deuce is about Times Square in the 1970s. I don't think the show is very good, but one thing that I always like a good historical show because it really captures Times Square in the 70s. Piles of trash, rats everywhere, muggers all over the place, you know, just blocks from Fifth Avenue. And you know, the police in New York, suddenly there was no more tolerance for graffiti. There was no more tolerance for littering. There's no more tolerance for a host of things. And is that only part of the picture? Yes, it's only part of the story. Of course, there's other elements to it, but that is one story, and that was very appealing. And by the way, every city in America paid attention, and every city in America just about hired someone from the New York Police Department, including Baltimore. And Baltimore hired a guy by the name of Ed Norris. He now has a show on Baltimore Sports Station. You can hear him. He's not a great sports authority. I'm not really sure why he's on there, but they wouldn't have him back in New York. But he came down here, and around 2000, he took over, and he did oversee a great reduction in the murder rate, at least in Baltimore City. The rest, you know, other crimes, it was much more mixed. So this is, you know, this is the example of where it is supposed to have worked. What should we think about the end result? I have mixed feelings. I'm safe in New York, but geez, you know, it is completely gentrified through and through. And our larger point, though, is that this broken windows theory of policing, this broken window style policing, he points out this was conceived in the 1970s. New York City was considered to be the great success story. And from then on out, it has really infected, you know, policing in this country across the board. Anybody have any comments or questions? Anybody have any comments about New York City? All right. Good. Let's move on. So, interestingly enough, this section, this point about broken windows, style policing, this comes up on a section on police training. What does this mean for police training, according to him? Hello? What do you have to tell us about police training? I mean, in the face of a given scandal, critics turn around and say, we need to change the training. What's he say to that?
I think he mentions that training isn't necessarily the problem, and that many police officers are actually, they have a bachelor's degree or are ex-military, and that there are like formed, I don't want to call it unions, but like agreed upon throughout the nation and different states about what policing should be like. Sorry, what was the question? So training really isn't the issue, but then he goes into a bunch of other things that are like one of them being like your first day on the job, they tell you forget everything you learned in training.
Great. Good. Well, you said a very important thing there. The question I asked was, you know, what does he, you know, so critics say when scandals happens, critics say, oh, we got to work on the training here, police training. And he says, no, that's not it. It's not the police training. That's not what's going on here. Why don't we talk about the example of Eric Garner, by the way? The Eric Garner example is a good example of a broken windows approach. Eric Garner is the guy who was accused of selling, cigarettes illegally, I guess it was, in Staten Island, a rather suburban part of New York City. And then he was killed by a police officer who used a chokehold. So similar to what we were dealing with this summer in the case of George Floyd. But what does he have to say about the Eric Garner killing? What's his analysis of that incident? To put a point on it, would training fix that?
When I was making annotations, I remember more clearly that to answer about the training, I think the training is not the highlight of what went wrong there. The intention of the officer was not, the training wasn't there. What I was more fixated on was Alex talking about the local community, like the business owners around were complaining about this guy, Eric Garner, because he was selling these cigarettes and it was in competition with what they were doing, right? And so there's a disconnect between the conversation of the training.
Okay.
I'm not sure, sorry.
Go for it.
I'm not sure if it's entirely relevant, but what stood out to me when talking about police training and the kind of there's a general standardized training set across states, was the focus on the proper appearance of police training over real substantial training and understanding and kind of preparation for more complex real world scenarios, I guess, but rather just kind of strict enforcement of rule and law.
Very good.
If I'm understanding correctly, I think a large part of Vitaly's argument was that police actually are very highly trained. It's just that a lot of the training focuses specifically on further militarization. That combined with the fact that things like diversity training and implicit bias training just straight up do not work. Because I think what he's saying is the purpose of the police as an institution is to, I'm gonna steal the phrase from the reading response, control suspect populations.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, Laurel, go for it.
I'd say part of training too, whether it's in their actual training or when I guess they're being sort of mentored when they first start, is that they're trained to believe that any situation can turn violent or deadly even if they let it get to that. So I think a lot of them go into situations of petty crimes like selling loose cigarettes thinking that their life is in danger and they overreact in a violent and aggressive way.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I think the other thing is the us versus them warrior mentality that they talk about, right? Everybody is sort of against you. I know that comes probably from more conservative police departments where they get training, but they're really hiring some paramilitary dude to come in. But you can train all you want, but it's not going to change the mentality that they see. And cops are in Facebook groups, not sending each other damn, look at this idiot who, killed this unarmed person. They're sending videos of each other getting slain, right, in different counties, saying, man, this is so fucked up that they're killing us. So these implicit bias loops,
That part was really interesting to me. There's this YouTuber, ContraPoints, who does a lot of philosophy, leftist breakdowns and stuff. She gets some criticism, which I think some of it is valid and some of it isn't, but her most recent video talks about justice, and she does a really good breakdown why it's so inappropriate least to identify with the Punisher, the Marvel character. It's basically the Punisher is a character that's just kind of like his whole deal is that he can't get justice for his family dying, so he just goes around like killing random mob bosses that he's never fulfilled. And like for police to identify with that is just so buck wild.
I have to ask you there. I'm not sure I got everything you said. Is there a Marvel figure that police are identifying with in particular?
Yes. Oh my god.
Type the name. Type the name.
Oh, I'll put it in chat. Yeah.
And look what a Punisher logo looks like, and you immediately recognize it on the back of so many trucks.
Oh yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's that skull, right?
Yeah.
Tough guys. They have the
Honestly cringy.
Couple things. Thank you, the Punisher. Okay, I'm sure my teenager will tell me about that after class. Let me push something to the forefront here, which many of you are raising, but let's make this very clear. You know, he thinks that the Eric Garner case kind of crystallizes the problem with broken windows policing. How so? It doesn't crystallize, it doesn't highlight the problem of training. It highlights the problem of the underlying ethos. How so?
Well, if we treat every crime with having the same amount of like urgency as all like if you like equate like spelling a Lucy on the side of like on the sidewalk to like a guy who just took 5 hostages, it's like you're always going to end up with a bad situation no matter what.
Yeah. Very good. Excellent. Anybody else? Yeah, it's you know, it's you know, so the reform that the proposed reform that came out of the Eric Garner case is, okay, we're going to ban this chokehold. And that's going to come out of the George Floyd case as well. That's not the real problem, according to him. The real problem, according to him, is that is twofold. Actually, you're empowering these police to, you know, he said that this is a rough quote. He says, but Eric Garner says that decision to, you know, weed out people saying Lucy's in such like vicious fashion, that policy decision that came from the top. That wasn't that cops like split decision that day. That came from the top. That was the overarching theme of the whole broken windows policing. Zero tolerance, even for the smallest of crimes. And right, as Zach puts it well, it's like treating all crimes equivalently when that, you know, doesn't necessarily need to be the case. Anybody? I thought someone was raising their hand. Okay. But there is also the issue what Gabriel points out, which is this warrior mentality. And I've written about this elsewhere. I think this is a problem. You know, this is a deep, deep problem. I'm gonna share your screen again and show you. You probably saw plenty of pictures of it this summer, but take a look at this. This is how the police showed up at Ferguson in 2014. These are the protests. This is where, you know, one of the first major Black Lives Matter protests when Michael Brown was killed by a policeman on the streets of Ferguson for a non-violent crime, and he was not armed. And this is how, look how they show up. How do they look to you? What do you think about how that uniform and that equipment, what does that do to a person? What kind of policeman does that make you? You know what I mean? Anybody have any thoughts on this?
I don't think they're very kind.
That's a good start. Yeah, if you lost your puppy, and are you going to go up to one of these dudes? Are you inclined? There's that for sure. Yeah.
They look like punishers.
They look like Punishers. You mean the superhero, or just like in general?
I am not familiar with the superhero, but like it's apt in this scenario.
I mean, there's two ways I've been thinking about it. On the one hand, what message does this send to a community about the police, right? When police show up like this, is it any wonder that communities erupt and they're up in arms, right? I mean, to put it lightly, these guys look like, not lightly, to get to the point, these guys look like an occupying force, right? These don't really look like police anymore.
Like they're prepared for war.
They look like soldiers. And
Yeah, and that's completely going to like incite like a fight or flight response into like the public.
Exactly. Which leads to the, there's one way to think about it from the point of view of the community, how this looks community. I think this is disastrous from the point of view of the community. But this is also disastrous for that warrior mentality that Gabriel was talking about. When you outfit police with this kind of shit, aren't you kind of like, you're encouraged, maybe encouraging is too hard a word, but I can't think of anything else. Aren't you encouraging them to go to war? I mean, these are semi-automatic weapons they're wearing. Those are military helmets, and those are bulletproof vests. And the protests in Ferguson, there was some looting and burning of buildings, but they were largely nonviolent, right? So why are our police equipped like this increasingly?
If I could reference the text.
Yeah, you're invited to.
Yeah, I highlighted this segment. I thought it was pretty vital. The federal government also began to fund training and equipment for SWAT teams in the 70s as part of the last round of major national policing reforms, which were intended to improve police community relations and reduce police brutality through enhanced training. These reforms instead poured millions into training programs that resulted in the rise of SWAT teams, drug enforcement, and militarized crowd control tactics. So I think the history here is incredibly important, because now that leads up to now where police are sharing the SWAT equipment and they're using it more to respond to protest activity and maim people and all these things, to quote more with the text, with automatic weapons and body armor than, to respond to barricaded suspects or armed confrontations or extremists.
Good, very good. Yeah, he quotes a guy by the name of Radley Balco, who has one of the top 10 best names of all time. And Radley Balco wrote a book a few years ago called The Rise of the Militarized Police. And he was principally talking about, after 9/11, there was such paranoia across the country about this terror attack. So I'll give you an example. You guys were little bebes when this happened, but ask your older siblings or parents. 9/11, everything shut down, okay? And I don't mean like in New York, I mean the whole country. And the entire city of Baltimore shut down. I was teaching that day, I had my first teaching job. We were all sent home. And do you know why they shut down the city of Baltimore? Because they were worried that terrorists would attack the docks at Dundalk. Okay, now, I don't see anybody erupting in laughter, which means you're not from Baltimore. Anybody from Baltimore is like, that's fucking ridiculous.
Had those docks haven't been used in how long?
Well, no, they're used for importing cars and gas and oil and coal. But to think that of all the fat targets in this country, they're coming for Dundalk, I mean. But I'm telling you this example because every single jurisdiction in America thought the terrorists are coming. We got to be ready. Radley Balco wrote a great article way back in like 2005 where he was talking about this little town in Nebraska. And by the way, the agency you need to know about is called the, oh, where's my cursor? Department of Homeland Security. So they are in the news a lot these days. I not exactly, their mission, what we call the charge of this agency has spread. Now they are dealing with the COVID crisis and the immigration crisis as this administration sees it as a crisis. But the Department of Homeland Security was created after 9/11 to deal with terrorism principally. And they were given a buttload of money, okay, to deal with this. And Bradley Balco talks about this little town in Nebraska that is worried that terrorists are going to come and poison their local reservoir. And they need a bear cat. You guys know what a bear cat is? Who knows what a bear cat is? Here's your bear cat. That's a bear cat right there. I think that they're also called armored vehicles. This big mama jama, right? So this little city in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, got a bear cat. And I don't know how you guys feel, but like if you ever like got a bear cat, like your uncle dies and you get a bear cat, is that just gonna sit in your garage? You know what I mean? You know what I mean, right? It's not just gonna sit in your garage, right?
Hey, you want to show it off?
Oh, fuck yeah, right? You're just waiting. Like, we got this fancy bear cat.
Bring it out. Yeah.
Huh?
You wait for any excuse to bring it out.
That's right.
Get out the bear cat.
I know. I heard Jimmy Joe got into a fight at the gas station. Get the fucking bear cat out there, right? Let's get the helmet on. Let's get the you know, and if you have all the equipment, why not use it, right? You better use the damn thing. And this is something that, as Gabriel Ches points out, Vital says that, you know, the government generosity through the Department of Homeland Security to these police departments is outrageous. The police departments get everything they want. And so they can freely militarize without a problem. About 10 years ago, if I can find this, I'll share it with you all. The New York Times had a wonderful like open-faced pictorial in their editorial section it was about the evolution of the riot police over the last 40 years. And it showed what the riot police looked like in the 70s versus the 80s, 90s, 2010. And it is just chilling. They looked like police in 1970s, but they don't look like police anymore, right? I'm going to pause there for a second. Anybody have any questions or comments?
When all you have is a hammer, every problem is a nail, right?
Good. Love it. Spouting wisdom. Anybody else? So now every jurisdiction has this. And every police force has a SWAT team that is outfitted in military fashion. And he points out that this leads to what we call, you know, mission creep. Mission creep is, you know, you're only supposed to use this in special occasions, but it gets used in others as well. And the SWAT team now is called for all manner of things. And this is something that I think was a very important issue over the summer, and Laurel brings this up, right? To what extent did the way the police show up, to what extent did that stoke violence, right? To what extent did that incite violence and a violent response?
I mean, I can speak from experience, like when the Baltimore started their George Floyd riots, and I was there. It wasn't until like the fourth day that things like really got bad, right? And all the protests were centered around the courthouse, and the police had installed these the metal barricades you could just drag around that kind of clip into each other. And they would stand there and they would sort of take people just insulting them. What happened was, like, as it got closer to the evening and sort of the quote unquote like the mainstream, like the moms and dads, like left, and it was just sort of like younger people sort of were there, and the lights started to turn on on the street lamps. You know, all it took was like somebody throwing like an empty water bottle, completely harmless, right? For the police to then like, you know, want to like get really close to the thing. And after like enough water bottles, I mean, these are empty water bottles. Some of them maybe have a little bit of water in. Then they like out of the courthouse pours a ton of riot people who were there in the courthouse the entire day, like waiting for this. As soon as they come out, then people get more upset, and then people start throwing full water bottles at them, you know, because they're already in riot, they can't get hurt. And then, you know, I don't know what their threshold was. It was like 6 full water bottles, and that was it. That was enough for them to throw tear gas. And the tear gas got thrown at us. People threw it back at them, and then they started charging, and then it got really bad. But like, that was how it was. It was literally empty water bottles. You know.
Well, that's a great example. Thank you for sharing, Gabriel. Did anybody else have any examples? Did anybody else take part in any of this stuff over the summer?
Well, there was like this, when we were like, Panama was in full quarantine for like a very long time, like full as in like you could not go out even for like anything unless it was to the hospital. And you had like 2 hours according to like your citizenship number, 3 days a week only. Like it was like we were quarantined, so people were like having a rough time, and then like with getting food and supplies, and everyone was like very like about to blow at anything. And then there was this meeting for I'm not sure how you say it, like a governmental party, I guess.
Political party?
Political party. And they met up at a restaurant, like at this really, really fancy restaurant when everyone was supposed to be in quarantine. And I don't know if they thought nobody would find out or what, but it was like they broke quarantine and they met up at this really expensive restaurant that was paid this dinner with governmental money. So everyone was like really angry about it. And a lot of like kids from the university started protesting outside the restaurant. And then there was like social distancing and masks and everything, but we still were not allowed to go out. And then the police showed up, and there was like, everything was like very peaceful. Like we don't have a lot of like excessive police force abuse usually, but there was one altercation between like one person and one police guy, and then that interaction got violent, and then everyone like it's like the part where they were saying about how it becomes like a war of citizens against the police, and the police, like it wasn't, they were supposed to be there to keep the peace, but it becomes like they're not there to keep the peace, but to reprimand, I guess. And then following that, there was like a couple of weeks where people were getting into a lot of issues with the police. And I don't know, like that never happened before. So the part where you were saying about how I don't think it's a coincidence that this kind of like, that people start talking all of a sudden for the first time about police abuse and excessive force at the same time that the US is having all these riots about the same thing.
Thank
so
you.
I guess part of it is that a lot of us were like reading all these things about like Black Lives Matter and excessive police abuse, like force, and then we begin to notice it here because we're seeing it all over like social media.
A similar thing happened in Serbia as well.
Were you part of it?
Oh no, I was in New Orleans, and it was also kind of like more similar to, I guess, the way Gabriel explained like the Baltimore experience. But going off of that, I think it is interesting to see how like globally with like kind of social media, how much like that has affected like other regions that was kind of more based on like government dissatisfaction with like response to COVID.
Thank you. Yeah, COVID didn't help things, of course. It raised tensions for sure. But two things about what Nicole says. You know, you can find documentation about this.
COVID helped the police a lot because Baltimore had like certain curfews that were being enforced, right? And so it was like 10 or 11. And they would use that as an excuse to like people were in a street, they would be like, okay, like you're violating curfew, you were against the law, you know, never mind, you're trying to peacefully protest. And then they would try to close down streets with the riot people, and then sort of box us in too. So I think the police are using that curfew as a means to like get it really aggressive with people. I mean, and it was all made worse too by the fact that they started trucking in state troopers who have even less regard for anybody in Baltimore, and probably are far more racist. That you know, they're almost all white guys, and they have the small shields, the ones that are like the circular ones, that not the big riot shields, and those are only for assaulting people, because that's how you charge people, and then you hit them with the side of it. You know, the bigger shields are more like defensive.
A couple things. First of all, you know, by the way, when the Occupy movement was finally disbanded in 2011, the government used various city governments, the mayor of Baltimore, they often used public health reasons to disband these. At the time, there were complaints about the health and safety of the camps, the Occupy encampments. So similar, it makes an analogy what you're talking about there now, Gabriel. But I want to raise one important point about what Nicole said. You know, in the war on drugs, Latin America is of special interest to the American government. And so the American government has been very happy and eager to export its model of policing or insert its role into policing in Latin American countries. So I wouldn't be surprised at all that countries in particular, you know, in Mexico and Central America, they would very much be imprinted, influenced by American styles of policing. But to go back to what Gabriel said about a minute ago about, you know, about his experience outside the courthouse, you know, just I'm going to reference you all to this image again here. You know, when you have a peaceful protest and these guys show up looking like that, you know, what does that mean for the demeanor of the protesters, right? On one hand. On the other hand, from the vantage point of these policemen, when they are dressed up like this, how patient will they be, right? As Gabriel was kind of insinuating, like throwing plastic water bottles, that should not have set them off. But you know what? When you're dressed like this, right, do you have to put up with anything? I wonder if that's some of the thinking here. You know what I mean? So just some thoughts. The general point is that this kind of warrior mentality, which is reinforced by their equipment they wear, this is a disastrous recipe here, right? That of its nature undermines, you know, the peace, I should say. I want to touch on a couple other things here before we break for the day. You know, there have been a variety of supposed reforms that every time there's an incident, people say a variety of things. You know, critics say a variety of things. Okay, the problem is training, change the training. Another thing they say, diversify the police. He doesn't think that's going to be a major solution either. Why not?
Like having, well, it's like that sort of joke that's going around, just like conservatives want more police and people on the left just want more police of color and LGBT police.
Yeah.
Like,
but that's not the solution according to him either. Why not?
It's not enough research that indicates it's effective.
I think part of it it's because
at least from what I remember, like the points that he's addressing as like issues, he never really directly mentions, or like at least that I remember, race. Like he's talking about mentality, about training. He's talking about like other things.
Well, he does bring up race. On page 12 is where he says, he points out that statistics indicate that even diversified police forces, they still have the same problems. So that's why he ends up saying the problem is not simply changing who the police are. The problem is not necessarily, and their racial attitudes. It's what you said a second ago, Nicole. It's the overarching attitude that seeps in and infuses the police force as a whole, right?
It's like an obsession with power, like when you let it get to your head that I'm the big guy, I'm the powerful, like I'm in charge.
Good. Jennifer posted an interesting video here I'd like to look at later, how law enforcement taught to dehumanize. The way I would think about it is like this. Why, as a policeman, as a police officer, are you urged to dehumanize? What is the overarching agenda that necessitates that? Now, again, he thinks the overarching problem is the broken windows model and this warrior mentality, which kind of fit hand in hand. They necessitate that you be dehumanized, right? So it doesn't matter what race or color you are, and that's not going to change anything. And the same issue goes with community policing. Community policing is another idea that critics have and reformers have talked up. Anybody know what community policing refers to? I just put it in the chat there.
Is it when the community itself like takes it into their own hands to like
Not exactly.
Is it higher policing in like lower income communities and whatnot?
Can you say it again, Sarah? I didn't hear it all.
Is it like higher policing in like lower income communities and whatnot?
It has to do with policing. I guess I'm not exactly sure what you're saying.
Like more police put into certain communities.
It's not even about numbers. It's about presence.
Right. Okay.
Anybody else?
I think that,
one more step.
Isn't it like when police are hired directly from like the communities they're policing, and the police departments have a lot of try to have a lot of nonviolent interactions with the police, so there'll be like police department sports teams and stuff like that.
You're getting there. I mean, you and some of you are, Nicole suggests this as well. Don't be deceived. It doesn't not necessarily have to do about the idea that the community themselves is hiring them. That's not why the word community is used.
Do you mean like I was just thinking about like community watch, when all the neighbors like watch out to see if something is going on, and they're like, okay, so we're not gonna get the police in here, we're gonna like deal with the situation ourselves. That's what we mean, like we're gonna be on the watch for crime.
It's not a question of who, but how. When you have a community watch, how do they do it? Right? Who do they know? What's their method?
Cameras.
I'm sorry?
Like cameras, and everyone's looking out their window.
Sure. Gabriel, were you trying to say something up there?
Well, I think that like conservatives like this idea, we see sort of like the black and white footage of a police officer walking through, and he says hello to the little kid behind the fence, and he yells at Mrs. Johnson across the road, and he's a lovely presence to see in the neighborhood, and everybody smiles at him. And everyone's
so Ian points this out as well. It's the opposite of those guys on their Bearcat, right? They are remote. Community policing is that the police needs to be ideally in and of the community.
But what about
not being chosen community? Not necessarily. Go ahead, Nicole.
like, for example, community watch. That could also incite like judgmental or like I feel like community watch is like, oh, that person doesn't look like it belongs here.
Oh, you're close. Yeah. Well, that is not that. No, again, the issue is not because community policing does not necessarily mean neighbors. These are going to be, trained police. But the point is, like Gabriel's pointing out, these guys have to walk on the corner. They have to walk on the street, get out of the damn car, get to know people, so that the bridge between, the boundary, I should say, or the wall between police community can be overcome. So in Baltimore has done a couple. This was, Baltimore is like a case study for every single thing we're talking about here, and that actually comes up quite a bit in his examples. And Baltimore, they have tried everything, and community policing was a big effort a few years ago. The city still tries to incentivize that if you're police, you can get you can get some kind of perks or benefits if you buy a house in the city, to live in the city. Most of the Baltimore City Police do not live in the city. And, along the lines we're talking about here, some people think that that is unfortunate. It'd be better if they were part of the community, they were part of the neighborhood. And Sheila Dixon, who was the mayor 2 mayors ago, she actually, just before the Freddie Gray incident, she did a pretty good job when it came to the crime reduction, in particular murders. And her main effort was community policing. That's what she was really focusing on. And it seemed to work for a little while there. But he thinks that community policing, for all its benefits, is still problematic. Why is that?
Well, because then by making them part of the community, like, you're not gonna want to arrest someone that's your neighbor.
Okay. Well, that's not exactly the problem he raises. They have no problem arresting. That is the problem.
Oh.
Here, I'll read a quote. This is on page 16. He says, middle of that second paragraph, when their job, that is the police, is to criminalize all disorderly behavior and fund local government through massive ticketing, writing campaigns, their interactions with the public in high crime areas will be at best gruff and distant, and at worst hostile and abusive. The public will resist them and view their efforts as intrusive and illegitimate. The police will react to this resistance with defensiveness and increased assertiveness. Community policing is not possible under these conditions. So I guess the problem is not community policing per se. What's the problem?
The purpose of the police.
Power dynamics.
Power dynamics. Well, look specifically about how the power dynamics are supposed to be carried out, right? They're criminalizing all disorderly behavior. What does that sound like?
Like, if you have like a small fight with your neighbor, you're gonna wanna give them a speeding ticket.
This is broken windows policing again. The point is that broken windows policing, again, is the overarching ethos that is the problem. Community policing is a fine idea, but they can't really play that role. They can't really insinuate themselves and build bonds of trust with the community when the overarching police policy forces them to operate a totally different way. The overarching police policy necessarily means they have to be hostile presences and have a punitive relationship. Okay? Which leads me to this point here. I'm going to build up to these last 2 points before we break for the day. We could just disarm the police. Right? See those guys in their Bearcats? Just take away their guns. Take away their helmets. Take away everything. Make them. My uncle is a policeman in Ireland. He's actually quite high up in the police force. And he always reminds me, policemen in Ireland, they don't carry guns. Ever. So what do you think about that? What about disarming the police? Would that make them kind and gentle souls? Or will that solve the problem? Is it even a possibility?
No, because there's more guns than people in this country.
Yeah, this is a non-starter. This is a non-starter. And if anybody read the article I posted for you all that I wrote over the summer, I was arguing that, you know, the state of our gun laws, that is a huge obstacle to any kind of police reform. You know, we can only expect them to be quick with the trigger when so many Americans are armed and we have such lax gun laws. Open carry, permitless carry, stand your ground. It's crazy.
I find it a little, not interesting, but kind of like redundant, I guess. I don't know, this like a little cycle, but like in a conservative mentality, I guess like maybe even like libertarian of like, we need guns to protect ourselves from the government and like protect our homes and kind of just that sort of like protection kind of thing they always bounce off of. And then like kind of like giving and arming police with such like intense military equipment is exactly like what you're trying to avoid and protect yourself from. So it's this like really odd cycle, just like never ending guns.
It's an odd cycle. It is really alarming. You know, I wrote a book about guns 5 years ago, and at the time, there had been like 1 or 2 guys who showed up at protests against Obamacare wearing guns. And I wrote at the time, I was like, oh man, this is a bad trend. You know, you can't have these heated public assemblies and then guns. And now this summer, we have these guys with assault rifles yelling. And of course, we have shootings, right? At Kenosha, there was, you know, and then in Portland, right? People actually die now. It is a crazy rhetoric, you know, the more people you get armed, you know, how do you expect this is going to go down? How do you expect this is going to end up? One of the examples that he wrote about that really struck me was a case in Ohio where an African-American man, he was walking the aisles of Walmart and he bought himself an air gun. And then someone called the cops and the cops showed up and without even any kind of warning, they shot him dead in the aisles of Walmart. You know, and then he points out in the next sentence, but Ohio has open carry laws, you know. So what, you know, this guy's critical of the NRA forever. Like, why do we have, you know, what kind of world you want to have these open carry laws, and are we going to have gun battles with the police? You know, this undermines the police for sure. Gabriel, you going to say something?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because like watching the police show up with all this stuff and basically oppressing people with their giant weapons, right? The argument actually does become somewhat valid against like having guns to hold accountable the government, except that the right has a monopoly on that, right? And not the left, because what we saw is that when the left did have a gun, like sort of like when the Black Panthers were marching around the streets with guns, then suddenly white people are okay with having like regulation for guns and decreasing them. And so like, I think that in a country that, like, I know this is it's sort of a more radical way of looking at it, but in a country that is so policed by guns, that has such a strong gun lobby, that has such an entrenched culture in guns, is not the solution to simply be like, you know, at this point, should the left arm themselves? Because that's the only way to really get it equal. And there was a big militia. There's a big black militia that was in St. Louis about 2 months ago, and they were dressed to the teeth, all in black, the same way that these white MAGA chuds show up. And it was a sight to be seen. It was, you know, I thought in some ways it's very encouraging, you know, to take back some, you know, that's the only way to use it sort of against people like that.
Nicole.
Yeah, it's just like.
She's sitting in Panama thinking, what the fuck is the problem with these Americans?
Yeah.
You're going to arm
from that. Like, We always hear, at least that's what my dad is like an ex-military, and he used to have guns at the house, and then he gave them all like I don't know, he got rid of them because he said that okay, let's say someone gets in the house, he knows how to use it, but the fact that any of us could use it, like a civilian that is not trained in how to use a gun, is most likely to die if he has a gun than if he doesn't have one. Because most people won't be able to shoot it because I don't know, shock or fear or like, and if they do, they're probably not a good aim. And then once they see you armed, you're a threat instead of like someone you're just robbing. Like now they don't see you like just as a person that's in the way. Now you're a threat to them. So like all this, like civilians that are armed but are not asked to be trained. Like I just don't see the logic of being like allowing people to have guns without any training. It's like giving people cars without them having to get like a license to drive.
I completely agree with you on that. And I think I have like a sort of interesting different background like in relation to guns. In that, you know, my family is quite left wing, but my father, like when I was like 9, he began taking us to this out to the desert, far east of San Diego, where there was a bunch of these ranges, to these programs for training young kids how to use guns and how to use them properly and safely. Fun fact, it was funded by the NRA, but you know, we were taking advantage of it. But our instructor in particular was incredibly like very rigid about all the things, you know, and how to handle the weapon and how to be safe with it and how to walk with it, you know, and ultimately, like by the time like I got like a pro marksmanship medal, like at like the age of 12, I had like a really high respect for guns. And I don't think most gun owners at all have that. And people who haven't shot a gun also haven't. We used to teach like shooting rifles in school, 22 long rifles back in the 50s and 60s. I'm not necessarily advocating for that, right? But I think, I feel like sort of trying to get rid of guns at this point, like I think that the only way to is probably like having really rigid training for the weapon, having background checks and so forth. But you know, I think that like the solution sort of isn't like trying to de-escalate guns is not going to work, especially with all the hardcore radical people out there.
I just don't get how, like, okay, I'm not gonna get into like the whole like, oh, if you have a right to get a gun or not or possess one. It's not about having the right, but like, how are you allowed to get one without being trained for one, but you're not allowed to drive a car that if you're not like trained to drive a car? Like you have to pass a test, you have to get like psychological tests, like you have to get, I don't know, like an eyesight test to be able to drive a car.
So yeah, so the argument behind people on the right who are advocates of guns for not having these things is the idea, still going back to like the tyrannical government, right? That like, oh man, like if we have it so that we can disqualify people for having mental illness from getting a gun, right? What's to stop, like back in the Obama days, or like what's to stop, you know, Obama, a tyrannical government from classifying all people who are known to support right-wing policies as being quote unquote mentally ill? We can't buy guns. And the only solution is not to have any of those regulations. It's retarded, it comes from a stupid way of thinking. But like, that's the reason why. And it absolutely should be like at least driving the car. What's weird though is that like, let me make one more point, is that in Maryland, there's, you know, to get a handgun in Maryland, you have to be 21, which is older than for the other weapons. And you have to go through a handgun qualification course, which costs a couple $100. So there's an investment there. Takes time, background check, all that stuff. But if you go to a gun show, I went as part of a project for a piece in sophomore year. I drove up to, what is it, not, what's the county outside of Frederick, right? I went to this gun show, and while I couldn't buy a handgun, I was like 19, if I went up to the ATM and pulled out $800, I could walk away with an AR-15, like no background check at all. But God forbid I tried to buy a handgun. So like the laws everywhere are completely jumbled and mixed, and it's ridiculous.
Let me jump in here because we're getting close to the end here. Sarah, did you want to say something?
I was just kind of gonna bounce off of what was already said, kind of like thinking about my family's from former Yugoslavia, and they came here during civil war, and there was this whole thing like dictatorship, communist government, and so having that perspective, I think Gabriel brought it up earlier, like the reason for like wanting guns and citizens to have guns is because like people were literally like taken out of their homes, just like stopped on buses, like taken into the like movie type things happening because citizens couldn't protect themselves. But with the amount and like not population of guns, but the amount of guns that we have in this country, like it has become such like a perverse sort of thing to deal with that, yeah, I don't know. It was a while ago, I'm sorry.
No, Sarah, that's amazing. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tie things up, and then next week I'll open up with a discussion of guns in specifically the context that I think Alex Vital is opening here. And so, you know, to facilitate that segue, and Gabriel Ches is asking, you know, if I have any comments on arming Black Panthers and the left. And I got into an argument with a reporter at The Nation last year about this exact point. So I do have an opinion on this, and I'll be happy to talk about it. What was I going to say? Look at this quote right here on page 26 at the bottom. This is kind of like the big philosophical quote that I think, you know, is a springboard for our discussion next week. Talk about, you know, guns and political legitimacy, really. He says, while police insist on the need for firearms, the vast majority of officers never fire their weapons. And some brag of long careers without even drawing one on duty. Some will say it acts as a deterrent and bolsters police authority so that others' force isn't necessary. This may be true at the margins, but to rely on the threat of lethal force to obtain compliance flies in the face of policing by consent. And then here's the key point. The fact that police feel the need to constantly bolster their authority with the threat of lethal violence indicates a fundamental crisis in political legitimacy. When you have to pull out the weapon, what does that do to authority, right? I think the reason I wanted to talk about policing in the context of this class is because I have deep worries and deep concerns about what that show of force does to the authority of the state. And just as a little bit of a hint, I think this problem is equally applicable to the case of left-wing groups arming themselves. What do the sight of those military equipment, what does that do to the authority and legitimacy of their position? I think it does a disservice. I'm just going to say that now, and we can debate next week. Gabriel, take note. You want a good argument there? Start at it. Start down. I don't mean start right now. I mean start jotting them down.
Socialist, gun groups. So yeah.
Good. Happy to talk about it. But I want to bring us to this big major point here towards the end of chapter 1, where he says, okay, all these little topical issues, all these little topical reforms, it's not enough. Community policing. He talks about cameras. They don't do the job. Apparently there's more shootings when the cameras are on. It's really broken windows policing, and we've got to get to the root of that. And the other issue is that we have to rethink the role of police in society, right? In short, and someone indicated this earlier, I think Ian pointed this out in the chat, right? he says, you know, political parties, they see, quote, all social problems as police problems. In general, we tend, you know, the problem is we're putting too much burden on the police here to do, you know, to do so much. And here's this quote from the police chief in Dallas on page 28 at the top. He says, we're asking cops to do too much in this country. We are. Every societal failure, we put it off on cops to solve. Not enough mental health funding? Let the cops handle it. Here in Dallas, we got a loose dog problem. Let's have the cops chase loose dogs. Schools fail. Let's give it to the cops. That's too much to ask. Policing was never meant to solve all those problems. Right? So, you know, he goes on to argue that the police have become, quote, a tool for managing deeply entrenched inequalities, which result from neoliberalism, neoliberal cuts, austerity plans, right? And that's why we're looking to this one agency, right, to do so much. And some of you have indicated like the libertarian thinking behind the gun rights movement. It's mirrored on that side as well by claims of individual responsibility, right? As an individual, you got to be responsible to take care for yourself. So the social safety, the safety net is pulled away. And then, you know, the police are also overburdened. So I'm going to leave it there for today. That puts us nicely next week to talk more about, you know, we can talk about the role of guns and what that does to political authority and peace in society. And then, of course, we have to talk about the war on drugs. And you know, one other big issue I really want to get into is, you know, voters signed off on these police reform, on this police policy, right? They signed off on broken windows. As we put it in common lingo, voters like, quote, tough on crime. They like tough on crime politics. And I want to get to the bottom of why that is, okay? So I'm gonna let you all go now, okay? Have a great week. Get on those papers. You got any issues? Email me, set up an appointment. I'm happy to talk with you at any time. And I'll see you here next week at the same time, okay? And I'll stick around now if in case anybody wants to chat. All right?
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, take care. Hello?
Hi, Furman. Hi. I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so if we choose to write our paper on the fourth questions, should we just find?
You mean number 4?
Yes.
Okay.
So should we write? Should we find answers from chapter 1, 7, and conclusion, or should we read mostly the whole books?
Oh, no. It's just intended on the reading you've done.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure, bye.
Have a nice week. Bye.
Good. Nicole?
I just don't know what to do my essay on. I just wanted to talk to you to see what piques my interest more. I feel like I'm a little like off my main for like typical topics here, like on this class.
Well, you don't have to be limited by the topics I've given. If you have a different topic of your own, I'm open to that too. Do you have any specific questions you want to ask me?
I don't know. Like, I guess the one that has interested me more is maybe the fourth theme with the police. I feel like it's the one where I feel most connected to.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I could write 5 pages on that.
Well, why don't you put together an outline and then send it to me, and I will tell you where I think you need to expand. If you put together an outline and it seems a little skimpy to you, I'll tell you, because I put together these questions, these topics with 4 to 5 pages in mind. In other words, I know you can do it. So if you're just unclear on how to get 4 to 5 pages out of it, I'll tell you how.
I mean, I could also And that's what I wanted to like ask you. Like, if I do the fourth theme, I could do like a comparison between what I've seen in the 4 years that I've been in the US and what I've seen home.
Well, that's more for your research paper at the end, right?
Okay.
That sounds like a research topic to me, which is very interesting and doable, but that's not for right now.
Okay, so this is just like an answer the question.
I want you to really pay attention to the text and capture his argument in his voice. That's what I really want you to do for these.
Okay. Okay, I'll try to get the outline and send it to you.
Yeah, and I'll tell you how it's looking if you're overlooking anything.
Cool.
You need to expand.
Thank you.
All right, see you later.
See you. Have a good afternoon.
Bye.